As a curator, the video that's been going around on social media of a pair of tourists destroying a piece of artwork in the form of a chair in an Italian museum fills me both with dread and, unfortunately, a sense of familiarity. Typically, things like this that happen in museums, you don't actually hear about them. Most places just slide it under the carpet. The object will be quietly removed from display. It may be repaired if funds and if practicality allow, and then quietly put back. But mostly the public don't actually hear about this sort of thing. And that's for two reasons. One, museums don't want to give people ideas. If you haven't thought about taking a photo like that, we don't want to suggest it. And two, a sense of shame. We as museum professionals are charged with caring for these items. And if we fail to care for them by allowing somebody to damage them, that's something that we really are ashamed of. And it's something that we fear being critiqued for. And it's something that you can see in the public response to this particular incident. There are some people who are massively going out of their way to critique the individuals who did the harm, but there's an awful lot as well who are critiquing the museum in terms of why were there not a barrier around it? Why was there not this? Why was there not that? And I can tell you that barriers do not stop this kind of people. These people knew that what they were doing was wrong. They deliberately waited to take their photo until after the security guard had left the room, so there was no one there to see, no one to challenge them. And that kind of person is not going to be stopped by a barrier. I have had multiple instances in my professional career where people have stepped over or under barriers in order to sit on objects to be photographed. In one particularly memorable incident, a young man jumped and did a backflip over a barrier in order to land on a historic bed. There are people like that out there. They are not going to be stopped. The only way that we can practically stop them is by putting every single object behind glass. And in a historic house setting, that really isn't practical. You'd have to wall off entire rooms, which is prohibitively expensive and not always actually the best thing for the object. The lack of air movement can cause problems with humidity and mold. So we don't want to be doing that. We do have to rely on our visitors not being idiots. And the vast majority of our visitors are not idiots, would never consider doing something like this. They are horrified by it, just as we are. But there are things that we all do unknowingly that can cause damage. And one of the things I thought was really interesting in this case was that in the public statement made by the museum, they particularly talked about the fact they were doing this in order to start a conversation, to raise awareness about the kind of treatment and respect that these items deserve. And I know that there are things that I've done in my past that could have caused damage because I didn't know. So I want to talk about those. For example, sitting on Canon in order to have your photograph taken. This is something that I have definitely done. They're just seen as these incredibly stable, permanent objects. You can't possibly harm that in the way that you can harm a piece of art. But actually, you can absolutely cause damage to a Canon by sitting on it and scraping it with a piece of metal on your clothing that you hadn't even thought about. Canon are quite expensive to repair. They're outside, they're exposed. And actually by damaging the paint surface, you can cause really quite significant damage to what underneath is iron and very liable to rust if it gets exposed to the wet weather. Similarly, when it comes to archaeological sites where people climb up walls or clamber over pieces of the actual site, that again can cause damage. It appears to be something that's very stable, very permanent, but actually you can be hurting it without realizing. So I just wanted to contribute my part to this conversation by highlighting that you may not realize you're causing damage. Even those who most love and respect these sites and these objects can inadvertently be doing something that is damaging, even if it's just as simple as taking a flash photo when you've been told not to and causing light damage to an item. This incident was tragic in its own right, but it has been an opportunity to start a conversation. Let's keep having one. Let's discuss and talk about why people do things like this, if you've ever done it, but also let's learn from each other and understand better how we can help preserve these objects, even as visitors to sites, not just as people who are there professionally trying to do so.